Hey there, this is Aaron from My Relationship Resources. Last week, I was listening to a live stream from one of my mentors, Esther Perel. Now, the discussion was about the importance of having space to complain. Now, I grew up in a family that didn't really nurture complaints. We were taught, and it was drilled into us, to be grateful for what you have and make the most of it. So, gratitude is usually my default mindset. So, I felt a big resistance when I heard this about a space for complaining. But then I realized when we have resistance towards something, it's usually a sign that there's an opportunity to learn and grow. So, I did go to this live stream with an open mind about complaining, which apparently in Yiddish is called krutching, which is Esther's origin. She described krutching, or complaining, as a very important part to creating community, to bonding, understanding, and respect. But I do have to believe when it's done strategically and artfully. So, what I want to share with you is some of the main takeaways that I took from the discussion. So one of the first things is if we neglect to complain, we run the risk of emotional combustion or becoming passive aggressive. Now, this is how I used to react to complaining, especially if it was complaints coming from my partner. Because of my upbringing, I'd feel a deep sense of resentment or even guilt when other people complained. I'd feel responsible and I'd try to find a solution for or fix the complaint every single time. Now, annoying for the other person, but also really hard work for me. And interestingly enough, when I did learn to manage my reaction to other people's complaints, the complaints seemed to reduce in their intensity and their frequency. So, was it me or was it the complaints? Einstein's relativity theory. So, we can't be grateful all the time, and complaining is a great form of release if it's done strategically and artfully. Because we can't know stillness if we've never experienced restlessness. And we can't know light if we've never been in the dark. And we cannot know clarity if we've never had doubt. And in this moment in time, with all the restrictions and uncertainty of Corona, and seemingly much less control of our existence than we used to think we had, there is quite a bit that we can complain about, right? Have you noticed that we're being inundated with funny videos trying to make light and sense of this turbulent time around the world? One of the best coping mechanisms in challenging times is definitely humor, and a black humor is even better. So it can be really helpful to have a mindful approach to complaining by incorporating some humor. And I'm going to come back to that in just a moment. So one of Esther's great points is that there are some people that you can complain to and some you want to complain about. And we need to be able to distinguish the right people to complain to, how we complain, and when we complain. So how often we complain. You want to avoid complaining to the same person all the time about the same thing, and especially if the complaints are about them. Now, if the complaint is about them, there are a few things that we can be aware of because mindless complaints will often get the other person upset, angry, or resistance. So here are three guidelines to keep in mind when we're complaining. The first one is to keep a civil tone, so no spite or contempt, and avoid making it a character assassination about the other person. The second is to stick to one thing at a time. So avoid letting the complaint about the wet towel on the floor be hijacked by, oh, and that reminds me, you never flush the toilet or close the sink for that matter. Ah, and your shoes, you never put them away either. And the third one is to be as specific as you can. So make it a supportive request. This is what I mean. So it's an XYZ process. So X, I had to pick up your towel today. Y, I feel annoyed when I have to pick it up or walk over it. And Z is what can I do to help you remember to hang up your wet towel? Now, there's no guarantee that your request will be fulfilled exactly the way you imagined it. However, rather than yelling, I'm sick to death of you always leaving your wet towel on the floor, you obviously do not love me or respect me, you're definitely having less chance of the other person's resistance or an escalation of emotion that caused disaster by using a more strategic approach to complaining. So really important to focus on the request and the task rather than being an emotional volcano. And a great idea is to use a filter before complaining by asking yourself, if I share this, what's it going to do to us and our relationship. And what is the best way to deliver this? Or even when is the best time to deliver this? In my online course, I give some great tools and techniques on how and when is the best time to communicate your needs and wants to your partner. And another great tool I share on the course is something the Gottman Institute calls stress reducing conversations. Now, these stress reducing conversations is literally how I started to shift my mindset about complaining. So you intentionally allocate a time, you can do it every day or maybe choose one day a week on a Friday afternoon after work where you and your partner get a chance to complain. Now, I'd avoid making it about each other, but just about life in general, life outside of the relationship. Try and avoid talking about family matters, for example, though, unless you're really confident that both of you see eye to eye about that particular family member or the event. So what you do, you set a date in your calendar, and this way that you're mentally prepared that you're going to communicate complaints. And one person complains at a time, and keep in mind, your job is not to fix their problem, but to listen. Because this was a game changer for me when I didn't have to feel responsible for fixing the complaints or solving the issue. Because would you agree with me that simply venting our worries and our complaints, and especially if they're really being heard and not resisted or devalued or being trying to solve, is often enough of a release? So whoever's in the position of listening to the complaint, you want to agree with the other person, or at least try and empathize if you don't fully agree, and just accept that this is their reality, this is their complaint, this is their time to release. So now this is the time where you can also introduce a bit of humor. So before you begin complaining, you can ask each other to rank the complaint from 1 to 10. So 1 is a very minor complaint and 10 is a major complaint. Now, a minor complaint gets 1 minute, for example, and a major gets 10 minutes, for example. So you can use a stopwatch on your phone and say, Kate is a 4, you have 4 minutes, go, and at 4 minutes, stop. So when complaining is strategic and artful, it can be a bonding experience and it can be insightful into what our partner values and what they're passionate about. Because what we need and desire always sits in the shadow of a complaint or dissatisfaction. And above all, complaining is a great release. So if you've enjoyed today's video, be sure to like it or make a comment or share it with a family member or a friend that you like to complain to or about. And be sure to go and check other great tips at myrelationshipresources.com.